Hello and welcome to episode 320 of Retro Encounter, RPGFans weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and as you can see from the title, this is going to be a somewhat unusual episode of Retro Encounter, but before we get to that, let's introduce the panel, starting with Jonathan Logan.
Hello, everyone.
And Dom Kim.
Hello, everyone.
And not one, but two newcomers to Retro Encounter. First, Abraham Kobylanski.
Oh yeah, finally made it.
And Stephen Mattern.
Hello, everyone.
So, Jono, Dom, Steve, Abe, this episode is not about RPGs. That is in fact
what?
the title. Yeah, indeed. That is in fact the title of an episode that we did in 2019, and we are bringing back that format. It's been 3 years, and I don't remember a time before March of 2020, so it's going to all seem fresh and new to me. But just in case, I did listen to that old episode just a few days ago, and on that episode we talked about 12 different genres or series that weren't RPGs but matter a lot to the four panelists on that episode. I personally discussed Mega Man, Civilization, and Guitaru Man on that episode, so that was a complete delight for me, of course. And
my favorite part of it was when we heard about the darkness deep in Alana's soul.
Oh yeah. Apparently, Alana has had some very troubling times with The Sims over the years. But if you want to listen to that episode, you can find it on our archive, either your podcast feed or RPGFan.com are ways to find that old episode. It's number 171, and it aired in I think January of 2019. But we're not going to live in the past. We're living in the present, and then looking back to the past a little bit. Each of the five of us has chosen two topics to discuss. That is going to be either a genre of game or a particular series or a particular developer. And we're just going to have a roundtable discussion of each of them, having fun, reminiscing and recommending and discussing. Before we jump into it, I should mention that we did discuss what topics we're doing ahead of time, but not all of them. I vetted everyone's ideas to make sure that there wasn't any conflict or repeat, but for most of this episode, the panelists don't know what the other panelists have chosen. So that's going to be a fun, spontaneous surprise here. So I guess without further ado, does anyone mind if I go first?
Please.
Go for it.
By all means.
Go ahead.
All right. Fighting games. I have been playing fighters for many, many years, since I was 6 or 7 years old, and I first found I think it was an arcade machine of either Fatal Fury 2 or Fatal Fury 3 at the basement of a hotel where my family was staying for a vacation. But I'm not here to talk about SNK fighters, even though I love many of those dearly. I really got into fighting games in the 90s, playing Street Fighter 2 with my sort of little collection of elementary school friends around the time. And my love for Street Fighter has endured over the years, and not just Street Fighter, but with Capcom's suite of fighting games. I've tracked down and emulated weird ones. I got really deep into Capcom beat-em-ups as a result, playing even the Dungeons and Dragons ones from the late 80s and Battle Circuit from 97 or 98, which is quietly the best one they've ever made, but not enough people have played it. But sticking to fighting games, I've played every generation of Street Fighter. I subscribe to a couple of YouTube channels that show Street Fighter highlights, and I watch those every week. I am just a big Street Fighter fan, and I can even get into weird Street Fighter story stuff that absolutely no one cares about if you let me. So maybe Street Fighter in particular, Capcom fighters in general, are among my favorite kinds of video games. And opens up to the floor. What's the Street Fighter or Capcom fighting experience of each of y'all?
Well, I just have very, very casual knowledge of Street Fighter 4 and 5. I played it a bit in the dorms in high school with the shared console that we had. But yeah, I have to say my knowledge of fighting games is a bit limited in this area.
Street Fighter 4 came out on console right when I was finishing college. And I was the president of the gaming club at the time. I hosted a couple Street Fighter 4 tournaments. And I did okay in them. I would enter the tournament and win a couple, and then lose to the people that were really good at Street Fighter. It basically was my Street Fighter 4 playing experience in college. But when we had retro nights, I could dominate at Capcom versus SNK 2 along with the best of them.
My experience started when I was very young. There was a convenience store very close to where I lived called Westside convenience store, and I used to go there to buy candy and stuff when I was little, and somehow they got their hands on a Street Fighter arcade game, and this was back in, it would have been about a year after it was released in arcades, and I would spend so much time there, not even playing it, but watching people play it. And then, of course, I was very small at the time, so I was never at the front of the line, and always the bigger kids were standing there. But then I remember the incredible level of excitement when it came out for the Super Nintendo. And I rented it, guess where? But yeah, so I really like Street Fighter games. Mind you, I'm not good at them. I have no real talent when it comes to fighting games, but I do enjoy them, and they are very fun to watch. Especially if you see someone who is actually like extremely good at. It's a sport.
I love fighting games as a spectator sport. I'm not hugely into watching speed runs or streamers of really any kind of video game. It's just, that's more about my personality. I like the playing experience of a game to be private and then talk about it on a podcast afterwards, unless I'm playing a multiplayer game. But Street Fighter or fighting games in general are just amazing as spectator sports, because if you're familiar with fighters and know about the exactly how much skill goes into those combos and those strategies, then watching the best people in the world playing them is fascinating. Again, I watch Evo every year or before it shut down for very legitimate reasons, and I subscribe to a couple YouTube channels that show high level Street Fighter play. The best one is Fight Club TV, which focuses on Street Fighter V. A game that has had problems over the years, but is definitely an entertaining game to watch, at least.
Well, similar to you guys, I also got into Street Fighter 2 through the Super Nintendo. Got in some heated fights with my friends, not just on the console, of course. Yeah, so I remember the eight original World Warriors.
I'm relatively new to following the series. I haven't played much of any of it. I played a little bit of 4, but not a whole lot. And I redeemed 5 when it came out on PlayStation Plus. But I mostly watch 5 and a little bit of 4 here and there. Getting into the series, I guess the backlog of the series, before 5, I should say, was a little intimidating to me, because there are so many versions of each game to where I don't really know where to start with each of them, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense. Paying attention to Street Fighter's story is mostly like watching arcade endings and reading the manuals a couple times. It's not worth investing a lot of brain real estate in, but there are ways to play almost all of the versions. My favorite thing, or I don't know if this is a favorite, but the last version of Street Fighter 2 before it was remade in the 2000s was called Hyper Fighting, and it had a PlayStation 1 version, and in that you could choose which version of your Street Fighter character you were playing. So you could have like original Street Fighter 2 Ryu versus Super Turbo Sagat in that game, and famously the Super Turbo characters had super moves, but some of the older versions had better priority or higher damage on their moves, and famously old Sagat's fireballs were so fast that it was by far the best. The original Street Fighter 2 version of Sagat was by far the best version in that mix and match version of Street Fighter 2. But I will probably play Capcom fighting games forever. I haven't played a ton of Street Fighter 5, but I've watched so much of it that I feel like I know what the meta feels like some of the time, at least. So and my love for that subgenre, sub-series, or spread out into other series, I don't even know what the right noun for it is, but I when a Street Fighter 6 happens, and especially if a Capcom versus SNK 3 happens, I will be back for it.
I do wonder how the older Street Fighter games would play for a younger generation who hasn't played them and only has maybe played 4 or 5. I'd be curious to see what they think.
What games were included in the 30th anniversary edition?
I believe it has Hyper Fighting, Alpha 1, 2, and 3, Third Strike, and I think that's about it.
Of those, what would you recommend the most?
That's
if any of them.
That's a tough question. Yeah.
Definitely not Street Fighter 1. You could just skip Street Fighter 1 straight up. Street Fighter Alpha 3 has an incredibly diverse character select screen and multiple ways of manipulating super meter, and that's cool.
And sort of like an RPG mode a little bit.
Yes, there is a story mode that lets you sort of level up and give your character extra skills. It's fun to mess around with, but also Third Strike. I mean, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike still looks amazing and plays amazing. Oh, its meta game is so set that it's basically a solved game in terms of like who the best characters are and what you need to do to win in like the highest level tournament scenes. But that's a beautiful hardcore version of Street Fighter. But that 30th anniversary collection is a very good value if you want some Street Fighter education. But I think we've done enough Street Fighter educating already today. Dom, let's go ahead with your first topic.
Okay, so it's going to be none other than probably my favorite indie game of all time, which is Hollow Knight. And Hollow Knight came out in February of 2017, I believe, made by the two-man team of Team Cherry, and with additional support in music from what's the composer's name? But yeah, anyway, they do. Hollow Knight was, from what I can gather, it was made by two people, and I actually didn't pick it up until December 2017 when it was on the winter sale, as you do, and it was actually just by pure chance that I got to play it. It was just the first on my list, just sort of alphabetically in the games that I picked up, and yeah, I ended up sinking in I think like 80 hours into it, and Hollow Knight really. I mean, for those who've listened to me or read my reviews, I am a big fan of Dark Souls, the series as a whole. And I really dig the vibe and atmosphere. And Hollow Knight really has that in spades. And it also, but it also introduced me to the Metroidvania and platformer genre. And yeah, after playing Hollow Knight, I've also branched out a lot into that genre. I've played stuff like Owlboy and most recently Ender Lilies, and I've also found a really nice new genre to dig my teeth into thanks to that.
Now, Hollow Knight's a bit of a curious question about RPG fan coverage, because we've had people ask our editor-in-chief, Mike Salbato, if we could cover Hollow Knight multiple times in the past.
Indeed,
several people on this podcast who've asked.
Yeah, exactly. I know Dom and Jono, both of you are among those. Alana is also a big Hollow Knight fan, eager to play Silk Song, and has asked about covering it. And even though it has a lot of inspiration from Souls-likes, which is a genre that we mostly cover, and Metroidvania is another genre that we mostly cover. Dom, you mentioned Ender Lilies. That's a game we have a review on the site from 2021. Despite those, we, or maybe mostly Mike, ultimately decided that it doesn't have enough RPG elements for us to cover it a lot, which is too bad, which makes this episode the perfect opportunity to talk about it.
Indeed, which is why I'm excited to be here.
It's incredible. I think it's the best Metroidvania released in the last 5 years, and that includes the recent Metroid Dread. I love it. I think it's a masterpiece of art design, of music, of environmental storytelling, of evolving the genre of Metroidvanias in very creative ways. The lore of the game is absolutely masterful. The way that it drips out information about this incredible world. The fact that every creature, even the most horrifying, disgusting ones, are kind of disturbingly cute.
Yeah.
I just think it's one of the best. I think it's one of the best games ever made. And I think one of the most impressive things about it is the fact that the bloody developers keep releasing more and more and more of it. Like you buy Hollow Knight, that's just the start. Like you get so much more content.
How much DLC was in what they call it, the Void Heart Edition?
I think it was everything.
I think there's only one piece of official DLC for it, but I think they added extra to it after post-release.
There's, according to this anyway, there's the Grim Troop and the Godmaster, but it's a lot of content.
Yeah,
it's not quite as much as Shovel Knight, the other Knight game, but it's a lot.
Shovel Knight has so much extra content that it's cross genre and game and developer. It's not almost not fair talking about it. But I have not played Hollow Knight. I own it, and it's been sitting in my game library unplayed, taunting me since I want to say 2018, but I'm not exactly sure. So I really should get around to it. I don't know when that'll happen, but help me a little bit here. This game is the characters in it are somewhat insectoid. They're sort of cute, anthropomorphized creatures that either resemble insects or resemble little people with insect sort of exoskeletons as armor and masks. Is that fair?
That is correct. Yes. That is, I'd say that's a pretty fair assessment.
It's a hell of a look.
Yeah.
It really is. And they are adorable, but at the same time, there is a certain bug-like sense to them, which is important because it is, it takes place in Hollow Nest, as it's called, which is this kind of like, it's an ancient kingdom that has fallen into ruin. And that's another thing that is masterful about this thing: the environments. Every biome, it just feels like its own individual world with its own societies, and the tone of it all is just amazing, especially when mixed with the music. Like, there's so much, like, there are parts of this game that could make you weep when nothing is happening.
Yeah.
You could just be standing there.
The ambience of the game is great, especially I remember when I first got to the City of Tears, I just sat on a bench just listening to the music and the ambience of the raindrops for like a good 10, 15 minutes.
Oh yeah.
And
I have.
Yeah, it's just, I feel it's just, as Jono said, it's masterful in its environmental storytelling and just getting the player to invest themselves into the environment naturally, so that even the very minimalistic, minute by minute story is it's not a big deal because you're so invested into the world and the lore that you just want to naturally know more about it. And I think that's I guess that's a bit of a detractor. From what I understand, they didn't quite meet their Kickstarter goals towards the end, which is why some of the end game areas feel a little bit unfinished. But that's nothing, I feel, in the bigger picture, in the grand scheme of things.
I think the Kickstarter was a mild success, but the game itself didn't really explode until it got its console versions about a year after the PC version came out. So there was a spike in popularity of Hollow Knight about a year after its initial release, which I think is when I got it. And I should probably mention the person who's been the number one advocate of Hollow Knight to me in my, of the people I know, is definitely former host of Random Encounter, Rob Steinman, which I think if Hollow Knight came out while he was still on staff, he would have used his, through pure anger, he would have written a review of it and put it on the website. But yeah, he's a big fan as well. Yeah. Abe or Steven, have you played Hollow Knight or at least have some thoughts about it?
I have not. Like you, it has also been sitting in my library for not quite as long. But I can say from what I have seen of it, it looks beautiful. I love the way it uses blacks and other dark tone colors, and contrast that with the primarily white colored characters, like the main character, for example. I haven't listened to any of the music, so I can't really judge it on that merit from a person who hasn't played it yet. But just the way the art looks, and I hear it controls really well, has kind of made me want to play it at some point. I think whenever Silksong actually gets a release date is when I'll finally be pushed to play
So
it.
You're never going to play it.
I mean, I have no idea. Are they going to release that game? We'll find out.
It does look gorgeous. I am not a huge 2D platformer fan. I may be making myself a target on this website, but
no,
yeah, it's just not really my thing.
I mean, one word of warning to anyone: it's not easy. Like it has pulled a lot of inspiration from Dark Souls. It is a hard Metroidvania game. Like you are not going to be able to beat most bosses your first couple of times playing it. You need to figure out patterns, go back, grind. Like it's a challenge, but it's one of those games where I've played I play games like that whereby the challenge just annoys me, but I was never annoyed by Hollow Knight at any point. I was always engaged in what was happening. It's like, I mean, I have two soundtracks of it on my phone. I have the actual soundtrack and I have a piano version of it. And I've worked many a day to using those as like quote unquote study music. Because it's just perfect for that. It's just such a vibe.
And to answer Dom's question from earlier in the episode, the soundtrack for Hollow Knight was composed by Christopher Larkin.
Yes,
and he is also the composer for Silk Song, which is coming out TBD, and hopefully that does not become the vaporware target of mockery of for 2022 and beyond. Now that Halo Infinite's out,
I think it'll be fine. I mean, the thing about Silk Song that people are forgetting is that originally it was supposed to be a piece of DLC. It was supposed to be the third piece of DLC for Hollow Knight. And then they were building it and they were working on it and they realized, we have another game here. It plays completely different because there's a completely different main character. We should just spin this off into its own game. And I imagine at that point, they went back to the start to rework it. And that's one of the reasons it's taking so long. And I think that's fine. I think it's worth it. I would love to get it in 2022. I think I'm more excited to find out what form they're going to use to announce it, because every time there's a Nintendo Direct, everyone gets really excited. Every time there's like a show, everyone gets really excited. So I'm just kind of pumped to see what they finally choose as the launch for this thing's final trailer.
You're going to be excited until it's announced as an Amazon Luna exclusive for the first year.
No.
Oh no.
I remember, I don't think last year when they did when Silk Song appeared on, what was it? I think it was like a Eurogame, like a cover for Eurogamer. I don't think I've ever been baited harder in my life.
Oh, I remember that.
At that moment.
What was the story that they had on that?
It was just like some snippets about its development. Is this it? Is this the release date announcement? And it was like, no.
Okay, so it was like an interview without really the news bite that people wanted.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a bit of a controversy.
That sounds like a masterful bait if there ever was one.
Yeah, they have to be very careful about what they say, which is why they have been saying absolutely nothing about it. Because anything that they say about the game or alluding to the game is going to get people running.
Oh, just a closing note. Hollow Knight is also fantastic value. Currently, I believe it's like $15 on Steam, and I don't think you can find a better value game for that price point than Hollow Knight.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can actually. Shovel Knight does offer a better value, but not by much.
All right. Well, no matter what night you decide to play in advance of Silk Song, my Amazon Luna is ready to go for when that happens. John, let's have you go next. What is the developer-focused topic you wanted to bring to the table?
Yeah, so over the holidays, and by the holidays, I'm just going to include December in that. I started playing Control, which is a game by Remedy Entertainment that got released a few years ago. About the Federal Bureau of Control, which is a federal agency dedicated to basically the supernatural. And I kind of just started it on a whim. I got it for free on one of the Epic Games giveaway things, and I almost instantly fell in love with it. I just was absolutely blown away by this game. The atmosphere, the design, the storytelling, the actors especially. Just drew me into this world. And then I started doing a little bit of research and realized that, well, first off, obviously it wasn't their first game. They've done many others, but also they kept referencing some of their previous games in lore dumps and pieces of documents that you find around the world, including Alan Wake, which is a game that many people probably know now based on the announcement of Alan Wake 2 a few weeks ago at the Game Awards. So I said, you know what? I'm going to put Control on hold and I'm going to go back and I'm going to play Alan Wake. So I bought Alan Wake, the remaster, and I played it and I loved it. And then I played its semi-sequel, and liked it. And then I played their next game, Quantum Break, which is like a time travel adventure. And as a fan of time travel, I also adored it. And then I finished Control, and now I'm just itching for Alan Wake 2. So the reason why I think Remedy, I'm just focusing on their more recent games. Some people might know Remedy Entertainment based on the Max Payne series, which is sort of what they built their reputation on in the very early 2000s, Max Payne and Max Payne 2. And then they released Alan Wake, years later. And the gentleman behind most of their games, the concept and the writing is named Sam Lake. He's Finnish, and it's a Finnish company. And he kind of seems like he wants to be David Lynch. Alan Wake is very much, it's as close to Twin Peaks, the video game, as I think we're ever going to get. It is about an author and his wife, and this author has had writer's block for years. So his wife books a cabin in this small little town, and they go to it. And one night his wife is kidnapped. And immediately he wakes up on the side of the road in a car crash with no memory of what happened for a full week. And he must piece it together. And he discovers that in the darkness, there are human-shaped, I guess they're possessed by something. And the only weapons he has are like light firearms and a flashlight. And in order to kill these things, he needs to shine his flashlight on them for a period to get rid of their armor. And then he needs to take them out. Now, it's a terrible combat system. I hate it, but the story drew me in so hard that I kept playing it. I kept pushing past it. Quantum Break advanced the combat quite a bit with some time travel powers. It stars, who does it star? Sean Ashmore. I knew it was one of the Ashmores. I couldn't remember which one it was. And it's, there's video capture and everything. And when I was playing it, I realized it was also referencing Alan Wake. And then I started noticing like references that were in Control later. I'm getting a little in over my head. The point is, this is a company, all of their games seem to take place in the same universe, but they are very isolated. They don't have anything to do with each other, just packed full of references. And they use a lot of the same actors in all of their projects. Which gives them kind of like this repertory company sort of feel. And as someone who came from the theater, I really like that. And their actors are really, really great. Like some of the actors, Courtney Hope, for example, plays Jesse Faden in Control, who's the main character. And she also plays a completely unrelated character named Beth Wilder in Quantum Break. James McCaffrey, who played the title character in Max Payne, and he also plays the director in Control. I can't pronounce his. I don't think is it Matthew Peretta? Yeah, Matthew Peretta plays the voice of Alan Wake, but he also plays a character, Dr. Casper Darling, in Control. So all of these games are deeply interconnected. They're all weird. They're all strange. They all have unexplored mysteries. They all explore the underbelly of what's normal, which really suits my tastes. And it very much feels like if David Lynch was a video game director, first off, that would be amazing. But second off, these are like the kind of games I feel like he would be making. I just love them. I had a really, really great December of gaming playing through all of their recent titles. And I cannot wait for Alan Wake 2 to come out at some point in 2023, I think.
Have you gotten around to playing Control's
yes, I played all of it. So there's the second DLC is entirely like a midquel to Alan Wake, which is really, really neat.
Huh. Yeah, I played a bit of Quantum Break. I played about half, and I really enjoyed what I did play, but I guess something else came up, and I never got around to finishing it. Although I felt like the like something that Quantum Break and Control share is the psychokinetic power angle that they have to the game's combat. I think it's a lot better in Control from what I've seen of it. I have yet to play Control, but I have it both on Epic Games and on PlayStation because it was offered on PS Plus January of last year. So I will get around to playing it at some point. Hopefully soon. I don't have a whole lot of interest in Alan Wake, though. I was close to covering it on another site I write for. But it didn't really pique my interest all that much due to what people said about the combat in the original version.
I'm not going to lie. The combat drove me so crazy that eventually I downloaded a trainer to give me unlimited flashlight power. And that improved the quality of the game measurably, because it all of a sudden I could focus on the story, which I adored, and it still had a challenge to it. It was not easy, but it eliminated one of the more annoying parts of the game, or at least mitigated it. The story is so good in it. I just love the story of it. And Control, you're right. The combat in these games is not fantastic. It's good in Control. It's fine. In Quantum Break, it's a long way from Alan Wake, but still, that's not the reason I would recommend playing these games. If you're looking for a really, really good combat system, you're playing these games for the atmosphere, for the acting, for the character, the stories, and the interconnectedness of it all.
It's written in the stars. It's cosmic, as David Lynch would say, maybe. All of those games are on my backlog, ever since Alan Wake, but just haven't found time to sit down for those. I'm excited though.
Yeah, if anyone's curious or listening, or anyone on this podcast, I would try to do what I did, which is I would download Control, because it is their latest game. It's their most polished, and probably has the best combat in it. And if you end up digging the world and digging that style that Sam Lake brings to it, then I would recommend you go back and play some of the other games. Like, I know Alan Wake just got a remaster, and it's a pretty good remaster too. It doesn't change that much of the game, but it does polish a few things. So obviously play that version. But yeah, play Control first and see if it's your jam, if you really get into it. And if not, no, there's no problem with that. It's just not your thing. But I really just dug these games hard when I started playing them.
Control is the one that interests me the most. I haven't played any of them, but I own a couple of them from various sales or PS Plus shenanigans. But the Control having the concept of, similar to an X-Files or even a Men in Black, where something that is decidedly not government/corporate is sort of given a government corporate setting. Like, it's like Control is almost about everyday objects taking on magical properties. Like, instead of some magical sword of legend that is central to a storyline,
it's a fridge.
Yeah, there's a warehouse with a refrigerator or a toaster that has supernatural elements to it, and you have to and the fridge is going haywire, and you have to go investigate it like that. But it's also but it also sort of makes fun of bureaucracy, in a way that that I guess Men in Black sort of does. Like, that whole concept is hilarious to me, and also has a lot of potential to me. And the fact that it has some pretty intriguing psychokinetic power gameplay for its combat and interactivity, that sounds just really cool to me. I avoided playing it on PS4 because I heard that it ran very poorly. Like, it just chugged the hell out of the system. But if I were able to improve my PC and try it there, or maybe try it on my PS5, I think that would be a good opportunity for it. But it's the Remedy Studio games. I've heard them being discussed on podcasts and websites for probably over a decade by now, and they sound really interesting and fascinating for all the reasons that John O established earlier. But I have not gotten around to any of them.
I mean, I played it on my computer, so that's a 1070 Ti, so hardly top of the line, and it played very well. Like, it handled it perfectly well. Obviously not maxed out or anything like that, but I had great frame rates. The game still looked really, really good. I'm not sure how it would play on PlayStation 4. I would hope at this point it would be optimized a little bit better. But yeah,
famously it ran sort of poorly. But again, like, people would say that their PS4 sounded like a jet engine trying to run it.
Well, that's really any game.
Any game made after, let's say, God of War 2018 has probably the similar complaint.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Mike. Like, I like the idea of the mundane mixed with the what's underneath the mundane, the supernatural kind of thing, and the way that this game handles it, with it being kind of like a nondescript, vaguely 1970s, 80s looking agency kind of thing. But mixed with all of this bizarre weirdness. And it's just the fact that this is these people's jobs. Like they're not freaked out by this. They're not weirded out by all of the strangeness or the supernatural. It's just kind of like, another bureaucratic day in the office, but this one involves a possessed fridge. It's a really nice juxtaposition, and it makes for some entertaining stories.
All right, so that was Jono's thoughts on his recent run into the oeuvre of Remedy Studio. Now let's talk about a single series made by a single developer that has had some ups and downs over the years. Abe, let's talk about Metal Gear.
It's not entirely a single developer anymore. There was the Metal Gear Survive just a few years ago that was done kind of.
I thought we didn't talk about that.
Metal Gear Survive is the Philips CDI Zelda game of Metal Gear Solid.
It's Metal Gear Solid with zombies. So yeah, Metal Gear Solid, as the box says, it's a tactical espionage action. So sipping that tea there. So when this game came out in 1998, and I was about 14 years old, and this game blew my mind because of the cinematic presentation of this game. I feel like this was possibly like the beginning of cinematic games, and I'm talking about cinematic is done like in engine versus full motion video, which was in danger of becoming the thing back in the 90s. I kind of imagine a parallel universe where FMV became the thing, and it's kind of sounds sad and cold. So Metal Gear Solid is it's a stealth game. There's a few other stealth series now that kind of sprung from it. There's Assassin's Creed and some of those games we cover.
And I think Tenchu came out around the same time as Metal Gear Solid, yeah. But Metal Gear, I mean Metal Gear Solid had Metal Gear almost a decade earlier, so it's not like it. I don't think either of them was mimicking the other. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid has sort of been the standard stealth action game for a long time.
Yeah, and I definitely think that like Hitman and Assassin's Creed are very different series in terms of stealth. But Metal Gear Solid is a little bit of an original. But yeah, so this is a stealth game, which is it's pretty much an action adventure game, except that you're absolutely beholden to needing to stealth your way through levels instead of fighting your way through them. Some of the later games in the series allowed you to give you a little bit more of an open option as to whether you wanted to fight your way through or just run your way through sometimes. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid, and if you so you pretty much can't advance if you have if the enemies know that you're there. You can't advance to the next story beat. Yeah, it's a little bit different from the typical action game. And I know we have a couple big Yakuza fans here. One of the main features of the Yakuza games is the gritty, melodramatic tone mixed with the goofy, off-the-wall sub-stories. I think the Yakuza series owes a little bit to Metal Gear Solid for that as well. I think Yakuza probably does a better job of compartmentalizing those two divergent tones. Hideo Kojima.
Trying to imagine Snake going to a hostess club.
Yeah, Hideo Kojima, the creator of the Metal Gear games, liked to mix those tones a little bit more, and it gets a little strange sometimes. The man is a fan of his urine jokes.
Unlike Yakuza, which never gets strange ever. So
I'm pretty sure there's a character that wets themselves in every single Metal Gear Solid game. So
yeah, I don't think urine plays a part in any Yakuza game ever. Not in any side quests, right, Mike?
Nope, never heard of it.
And the probably the most quirkiness is seen in the bosses in Metal Gear Solid. For one thing, in the first game, every boss is named like a thing and then an animal. So you got Vulcan Raven, you got Revolver Ocelot, Sniper Wolf, and Psycho Mantis.
Okay, quick aside. Quick aside, listener, you're probably thinking of Mega Man X right now, and that's totally fair. But I think both Mega Man X and Metal Gear Solid get that from Kamen Rider, because that was which is a superhero show from the 70s. Because a lot of monsters in Kamen Rider were set up like that, and Kojima has even like tweeted commentary tracks for old Kamen Rider episodes. So I'm pretty sure that's the inspiration there. Sorry, Abe. Please continue.
But there were a couple things, especially about like the Psycho Mantis battle that really stuck in my mind. This series has like probably all of my favorite boss fights in video games, but there's a few fun conventions in the Psycho Mantis fight. As you can kind of guess from his name, he is a psychic. He does the ESP and mind reading and telekinesis and all that. So because he can read your mind, you have to, you can't defeat him in conventional ways. You can't, if you aim your gun at him, you can't hit him. So you had to switch your controller to the second port, and then he can't read your mind, which I thought was the creative use of the PS1.
Kojima just loves finding new ways to mess with players.
Yeah.
With every game he makes. Also in Metal Gear Solid 1, like I hope you got that game in the original box, because at one point in the game when you need to call someone, there's no way to find their call number on your radio unless you look at the back of the box and see her name with her call number on one of the images at the back of the box. Yeah. Nowadays, if you don't have that box, I mean, the internet's got your back, but still that was just unthinkably weird for the time. And my favorite part of the Psycho Mantis boss fight is if you have Konami games on your memory card that's in the first controller port, he'll comment on it. Like I think the most famous one is he'll say, "You like Castlevania, don't you?" And I should mention here, I actively dislike stealth games in general. Whenever there's a stealth mission in a game that's mostly not about stealth, it's my least favorite part of the game. That's true from that's true from your Zeldas to your Infamouses to what have you. So I have played through most of Metal Gear Solid 1. I don't remember why I stopped playing it. I ended up watching videos of parts of the game I didn't play, and I've played a tiny bit of Metal Gear Solid 2. But otherwise, I've decided I don't want to play any Hideo Kojima games, because the guy's just, I feel like his head is way too far up his own ass. And getting as far as I did in Metal Gear Solid was a struggle, because I really have a problem dealing with stealth games. There's a stealth segment in Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core that's not even that hard. It's probably 10 or 15 minutes, but I just got so frustrated at it. I just sort of stopped and started a YouTube walkthrough of that stealth segment just to get through it. So because of stealth reasons, and not really because of writing reasons, even though again I don't always love Metal Gear Solid writing.
Well, those games are so convoluted.
I don't have problems with convoluted stories. I just go back to our brief discussion on Yakuza a minute ago. But I just haven't really gotten into Metal Gear Solid, despite playing more than half of the first PlayStation 1, because of stupid, stubborn reasons. But and also I don't like stealth. But I feel like I know most of the story of the entire series, even going down to like your Metal Gear Acids and Revengeances, just because I've heard them talked about so much. So I have an appreciation from afar of the series, but I cannot call myself a Metal Gear Solid player or fan.
See, I love stealth. I love stealth. Stealth is fun for me. And I really like the first title of the series. I never bought it though. I rented it for like, I think 2 or 3 weekends in a row. I don't think I've ever beaten the game, but I enjoyed it a great deal. But then I never got a PlayStation 2, especially when the PlayStation 2 came out, and not a PlayStation 3 either. So I sort of missed where the series evolved to, and I've just never gotten back on there. But I've heard some excellent things about, stealth, for example, and using balloons to capture your enemies and send them to non-lethally get rid of them,
and that appeals to.
Yeah, and that appeals to me. So this is a series that I feel like I could possibly get into, but there is like you were talking about a second ago, there's a lot of story in the way of making my way through it. So I don't know. I don't know if this is a game I will ever fully get into or not, but I do appreciate where it came from originally. And I mean, the Nintendo Metal Gear, for the NES is a pretty amazing game for that system, especially for the time.
Well, there is a lot of story, but the one thing about, I was thinking about this, and the one thing about these games, I think, if you play the first one, you don't necessarily have to play the rest of them in order. I think you pretty much get at least, since it is a very convoluted story, you kind of need a little bit of a basis for a feel as to what's going on and why things are significant in the other games. But I think you could, in terms of like the timeline, they jump around all over the place from the 70s to the 2010s. So I think you probably could, if you play the first game, probably just jump to whichever other one and probably get a good idea of what's going on.
Again, I know a lot of story about these games without having played all of them. I know that Metal Gear Solid 3 takes place in the 70s, and Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3 have different main characters for each of them. Yeah. And they're avoiding some spoilers here, with sort of different hitting different parts of the Metal Gear universe in each of their stories. But again, Metal Gear Solid 4 is sort of a Snake's final chapter kind of game. Metal Gear Solid 5 adds a bunch of open world elements and hits a different era in the Metal Gear Solid timeline that hadn't really been approached yet. Isn't Metal Gear Solid 3 like a prequel to Metal Gear for the NES?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, so like there's a lot of interconnected story stuff in these games and a lot of references, but in a way that you don't have to play all of them in order, but it's more rewarding the more you play them. But maybe don't make Metal Gear Solid 4 your first one. It's sort of the vibe I get.
Yeah, and the second one is a little bit skippable in terms of the story.
Yes, Snake's Revenge, that unassailable classic.
If Konami adds, I don't think they did, but if they add, I think it was didn't 1, 2, and 3 have a collection?
Yeah.
It's delisted on the
all
Xbox
right, look, if you're
store,
interested in Konami adding something, stop hoping.
If they add it back, or if I can find my PlayStation 3, I will go and play the Metal Gear Solid series.
Yeah. Sadly, I was looking at it, and I think the only way to play Metal Gear Solid 1 on any platform is through GOG. And if you don't want to give CD Projekt Red money, then you're out of luck, I guess. Sadly.
Yeah, tracking down that series is going to be my worst enemy because it's a series that I've always wanted to try, but getting a hold of the games is quite hard if it's not 5.
Yeah, it is kind of sad that Konami doesn't really seem to have a whole lot of interest in bringing those.
So it is a series that I want to play. It's just a series that I can't get my hands on, unfortunately.
Well, if you wait a little while, I'm sure they'll release some NFTs of like screenshots of the game. That'd be great.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I've heard rumors of that for their because it's the Metal Gear Solid's 35th anniversary this year.
Yeah, that's how you want to celebrate it with NFTs.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Konami's not. I've mentioned this in other podcasts, so I'm sorry, but Konami's not really in the business of making new games anymore. But they're definitely willing to make collections of their older games that are packaged decently. I think because Konami's other businesses, like health clubs and gyms, have been affected badly by the pandemic, while their video game downloads have been perhaps doing as well as ever. So I think it's maybe they would need some cooperation with Kojima that would never happen. But I think Konami releasing some Metal Gear digitally is possible. But don't look for a great new Metal Gear game coming soon.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. But I don't remember the exact circumstance, and I'm not going to dig up an article about it right now. But there were some Xbox 3. It was like a collection on Xbox 360 that was available on Xbox One and Series consoles and back compat that for whatever reason Konami delisted. I don't remember why or if they said why, but that was really the only way that I was going to be able to get a hold of those games reliably. And you can't. So I don't know.
Wah, wah.
I hope that they release the games on modern consoles in one way or another.
I mean, 5 is not a terrible starting point. It's kind of a different flavor than the other games. The first 4 were very heavily focused on the story, and for the 5th game, it's a little bit more sparse. And the real focus is on really wide open stealth gameplay, and playing in the sandbox of I think it's Afghanistan. I didn't get into the 5th one as much, mostly because it just felt so different from the first 4 games. It seems like a great game, but kind of need to come into it with a different perspective, I guess.
It definitely leans more into that open world style of game. It seemed like.
I think 5 still has possibly one of the best sandboxes, just in terms of the sheer like options available to you to tackle like any sort of enemy outpost in really any fashion you like. You can plan the physics ahead and like preemptively plant mines so that you can predict how the enemies are going to react to you, I don't know, blowing up like a balloon in front of them so they like stumble backwards into the mine that you set up earlier. And there's like a whole bunch of crazy montages on YouTube that really, I feel, demonstrate just how well implemented the systems are in MGS5.
Yeah, and the very concept of basically sort of capturing an enemy unit and airlifting them back to your base only for them to join you for future missions is one of those things that doesn't really make sense until you do it, and then it suddenly becomes incredibly fun, kind of like explaining how Mario possesses things in Mario Odyssey. It's like, I don't really get it, but once you try it, you totally get it.
No,
on paper that sounds very immersion breaking.
No, you don't get it, but it is fun.
Yeah,
it's one of those. Yeah. It's one of those quirks, one of those Kojima quirks.
Yeah, God, Kojima quirks, from his thoughts on the Cold War to his open horniness in every single game, going all the way back to Police Knots and Snatcher. We don't. And again, maybe I'm more interested in playing Snatcher than I am.
I'm not even sure you can say that on a podcast.
And
yeah, the subject matter might not modernize too well, but
yeah, but I think we've exhausted most of our Metal Gear Solid discussions, especially since we're less than halfway through and knocking on the door of an hour. So, Steven, let's go on to your topic for round 1.
It's a smaller game, but it's a game that has seen like one big refresh and has been released on pretty much every major console.
How dare you call Tetris a smaller game, you monster?
It's an indie title.
Tetris Effect is a smaller game.
I'm detecting Tetris slander, and if you don't change your tone, young man, I'm ending the podcast this moment. I will turn this podcast around.
So I really enjoy Tetris Effect. I think, to other panelists this may, it's, I think, the only version of Tetris that I have really gotten into and have always wanted to come back to. I've played almost every version of this game. I have not played the Switch version because I don't need to double dip, and I got 1 or 2 of the other versions for free. I recently played... So what Tetris Effect is it is basically modern Tetris playstyle with the backdrop and music of like similar inspirations from, I think, Tetsuya Mizuguchi worked on Luminous and Res Infinite. And it brings that philosophy into Tetris to great effect with gorgeous backgrounds and particle effects. And it really evokes the feeling of just getting into the zone, even though there's a quote-unquote zone mechanic in the game. But I just like playing it so much because it's very vibrant, and I feel like I've done better at Tetris than I have playing other versions of the game that are more simple and not heavy on the effects and music. I've recently gotten to the VR version of the game, and I really enjoyed it a lot. I think if VR was easier for me to adapt to, I'd probably be playing that a lot more. But I just really enjoy Tetris Effect. I want to go back and play Mizuguchi's other games at some point, being Rez and Luminous. I think I tried Luminous once or twice, but didn't get too far into it since it's a very unique type of puzzle game. But I enjoy Tetris Effect quite a lot. I don't know if you guys have played it before.
I have.
I have also. I've played many a Tetris game, and Tetris has had an unusual resurgence recently with Tetris 99 on Switch as a sort of a wacky, crazy multiplayer version of Tetris, and Tetris Effect, which has, a uncomparable video and audio presentation for what Tetris is. And Mizuguchi with, Rez all the way back in the Dreamcast and Luminous all the way back in the PSP were puzzle games that had some Tetris DNA in there, but really take the sights and sounds of what a puzzle game is to a level of psychedelia that feel really special. I love both of those games, especially Luminous. And if you're Luminous curious, then the Luminous remastered for the Switch is brilliant because it has, I think, every stage from Luminous 1 and 2 in it. With like the exception of a couple licensed songs. So that's a hell of a package. But Tetris Effect, as a really special, cool evolution of Tetris, is just fantastic. I have not played it in VR, but I have played it on PS4 a non-trivial amount, and it comes very recommended. And spreading this out a little bit, the way that companies have been modernizing their most classic puzzle games, when it's pulled off well, it is almost the most exciting thing they could possibly do. I'm a big fan of Tales of Xillia and Soul Calibur 6, but the coolest thing Namco has done in 20 years are the updates they've made to Pac-Man with the Championship Edition games of Pac-Man. So, like, basically taking Tetris and making it feel new and special is very, very powerful for me. Tetris was the first video game I ever owned on the Game Boy way back in the day. So, a version of Tetris that's just beautiful and acclaimed was really exciting to me. And Mizuguchi is exactly the right person to handle it. And I haven't played it. I haven't played Res Infinite. I've only played old Res. But Luminous Remastered is a really, really good title to pick up.
I honestly haven't researched the rights for this game because I'm actually surprised that a Tetris Effect game came out outside of Sega and Electronic Arts, because from what I remember, those two companies share the licensing. So I'm very happy that we got a very unique version of modern Tetris outside of those two companies.
Who owns Tetris is a very weird question. It was developed in the Soviet Union in the middle 80s, and a lot of different companies have had different versions of Tetris over the years. My favorite version of Tetris before Tetris Effect is actually Tetris DS, which I think was
good.
Yeah, which I think was built in studio by Nintendo. So I don't think Sega or EA necessarily owns the rights to it. And again, Nintendo owned Tetris for a while, but I think it's owned by like EA for mobile versions and a special original Tetris company for non-mobile versions, and they license it out to all kinds of people. I think is how it happens, but I could be wrong about that, because again, who owns Tetris and who's allowed to make Tetris games has changed with every decade. I'm just glad that Tetris Effect got made because it owns.
Me too. I just said that off the top of my head because I know that EA makes mobile versions of Tetris games, like you said, and then Sega made the Puyo Puyo Tetris games. So those are what popped into my head most for games that have came out recently, other than Tetris Effect. that used the Tetris IP?
I mean, there's a few documentaries about this on YouTube of just how Tetris, who owns it and that kind of thing. According to Wiki, the Tetris company owns the exclusive right. Okay, so it's the exclusive licensee of Tetris Holdings LLC that owns the Tetris rights worldwide, but it does license the Tetris brand now to third parties. So yeah, we all own Tetris.
Have the rest of you played Tetris Effect before?
I own it for Switch. It might be one of my favorite versions of Tetris. Like Mike, when you said Tetris DS, like I had it for Game Boy as well, and I played the hell out of that. I actually broke my first DS because I was playing too much Tetris, and I broke the right shoulder button. It just wore off. It just broke. So I had to buy another DS, and that version of the game is amazing, especially if you love Nintendo history.
Don't worry, I played so much Monster Hunter on PSP. I am on my third broken PSP now. So I understand a thing or two about wearing out handhelds.
Yep. But
you mentioned playing Tetris Effect on Switch. I really wish I had an OLED, because if I did, then I would buy the Switch.
I don't have an OLED. I just have my big screen TV.
I have my
jaw-droppingly good.
I have Tetris Effect on PS5. It's the PS4 version of it on PS5. But
I had no idea that what I wanted was to play Tetris while someone flashed a strobe light in my eyes.
But playing it on a high handheld on a high quality screen like the OLED Switch seems ideal.
For me, Tetris is the closest I come to meditation. I don't like meditating. I've done it before. I did it in theater school. I hate it. I do a lot of yoga, but that's for fitness, not for clearing my head. But when I play Tetris, it's really like it clears my head instantly. I can shut off all other thought processes and just play. So when I downloaded Tetris Effect Connected, I didn't know what to expect, and I found that it was a tremendously meditative experience. The music is gorgeous. The backgrounds, the art of it all is stunning. There are some levels that drive me absolutely crazy. Any level that doesn't actually use solid squares for the blocks really screws with my head for some reason. Like the Da Vinci level with where the pieces are like little windmills, even though they are still in the same arrangements, for some reason my eyes see that and it just short circuits my brain, and I have so much trouble figuring out patterns. I think it's amazing. It really hits a real sweet spot for Tetris for me, where like Tetris 99 is amazing, but it's a very different experience. That's not meditative. That's the closest thing I've come to a street fight.
That's stressful.
That's an assault. That's going back to Capcom Fighters. I think Tetris 99 is a fighting game, while Tetris Effect is a meditative, like floaty game. Maybe closer to Journey than Tetris 99.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever become. I'm never as feral as I am when I'm down to the last two people playing Tetris 99. That's when I get very, very focused and like I could kill a man right now, but with Tetris blocks.
Rolling it back a little bit, before the Tetris company formed, Tetris was owned by Nintendo for a while, and don't be fooled. Tetris Attack is not a Tetris game. Tetris Attack for the Super Nintendo is a Nintendo version of Puyo Puyo, which didn't have an officially named Puyo Puyo game worldwide for many years later. Pokemon Puzzle League is also a Puyo Puyo game. But Tetris Attack is the Super Mario Yoshi's Island version of Puyo Puyo for the Super Nintendo. Not a Tetris game. Let's separate that away from Tetris Effect. Please continue. Okay, maybe if I'm talking about Puyo Puyo, maybe it's time to move on to the next topic. Let's move on to round two, and let's try to make round two a little bit shorter because we're already over an hour. We were just talking about how Tetris Effect is a very meditative game. When I want to turn off my brain a little bit and do something meditative, that's a little unfair because I'm about to talk about a genre that is somewhat cerebral, but I treat it as meditative because I never challenge hunt or play these on the hardest difficulty. Customizable card games and deck building games, but their digital versions are something I've gotten more and more into over the years. I played Magic the Gathering as a kid. And I stopped playing around when the Wrath cycle ended. For anyone that is up to date on the Magic the Gathering stuff, which I am not, and I have done things like draft tournaments at conventions before, and had some fun with Magic. But I have had the most fun with card games I've ever had recently, because my least favorite things about card games, like cleanup and scoring and counting very complicated rounds, are automatically taken care of in these games with digital versions. So I have digital versions of let's say 3 or 4 Magic Duels of the Planeswalker games, and Slay the Spire, and Monster Train, and Ascension, and at least 2 branded deck builder games for either mobile or PC. And once I have a grasp of the rules of one of these and all of the cards, and Sentinels of the Multiverse, that one might be my overall favorite, even though that's more of a CCG and not a deck builder. Basically, taking everything that I love about these old deck builders, doing the scoring automatically for me, and having me not buy goddamn booster packs and waste all of my allowance on them every week, and instead either having it as an all-in-one package, or an all-in-one package and then a couple DLCs to add a bunch of more cards. That pricing structure, as well as them being on sale on Steam all the time, has made me, like, when I want to just play a video game and not think about story and not focus on intense action, I will just play a round of Monster Train or Sentinels that'll take me between 15 and 30 minutes and just have a great time. And because I already know the cards, I've played them long enough, I can just figure out, or a run of Slay the Spire, whether it's just individually contained rounds that don't connect, or they add a roguelike element to it, like Monster Train or Slay the Spire. It's just, playing card games is a format I love, and the digital versions of those cut out some of the BS that I don't love. And as a result, I have put an irresponsible amount of time into digital versions of real life CCGs and DBGs. And so it's a genre that I can't call myself an expert or a fiend of, but like I play these the way my dad plays solitaire, and it's something I've settled into over the years.
Oh yeah.
Before you mentioned your disdain for CCGs, I was going to ask you if you've ever tried out Teppen.
Oh, Teppen, the Capcom one. Yeah, I played a little bit of Teppen when it launched, but then it just has too many elements of gacha that I don't want.
Yeah, and something that you don't have to worry about in the games that you were talking about was the standard rotation of Teppen is kind of unforgiving. In that I think it has a rotation of 6 packs at once. So getting back into the game is rather hard, but I do understand the appeal of just online versions of card games where you have most, if not all, of the library already to play around with.
Like a game like Ascension or Sentinels, where here's $10 for the main game and then a couple expansions at $4 each. I'm not pressured to buy gacha packs or a ton of expansions, even though both of those two games have a lot of expansions. Like the self-contained nature of it is part of why I still play Duels of the Planeswalkers 2014, and I'm not interested in Magic the Gathering Arena, which sounds insane, justifiably insane, but is sort of just goes into my mindset of what I want to get out of these. But
to be fair, I hear that Magic the Gathering Arena's economy is really bad.
I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised. I mean, the economy was really bad when I was buying like those Wrath Cycle Tempest and Stronghold packs in 1998. So I get it, and I don't want to do that again.
So I've also gotten really into those style of card games, but I haven't really considered the angle of the buy it once and you have all the library type of games where you play against AI.
I play some of it online, but probably 80% of the time is against AI. Because I do this to relax and not to win.
It's definitely something I want to try at some point.
Yeah, it does sound very interesting because I play way too much of like CCGs online, such as on Steam I play Shadowverse a lot, which is it's basically like anime Hearthstone in many ways.
Yeah, I remember when that was being advertised quite a bit.
Yeah.
And Hearthstone again I did try Hearthstone, but I bounced off it pretty fast because again it's not what I'm looking to get out of a CCG.
But yeah, I definitely do agree with like the how meditative it can feel, because it's not like I mean, yeah, for me, the more mechanically challenging a game is, the more I have to be like very actively playing the game and very involved, and in many ways it is tiring even after just like an hour or two. But with with CCGs, for me at least, it is very relaxing. You just like, for me, it just plays in the background almost. Oh well, it's my turn. Yeah, I guess I'll play this card now. And then it's just, okay, I'll just wait for the opponent to do their thing, and then I can go back to doing my thing in the meantime. So it is, a very relaxing experience for me as well. I have to
exactly
say.
Right. Yeah, either to relax or to do while you're watching something or listening to a podcast. I think that's the ideal format.
I remember actually a Magic the Gathering game from the 1997. It looked like from Microprose, where it was actually like an RPG where you build up a deck and then you had to wander around this whatever the world was called.
I think
what's the world of Magic the Gathering called?
Well, the thing is, there's planeswalkers that travel between different worlds. So it was probably set in one of those, and I either played that or watched a friend play it because it sounds very familiar.
It was hard as hell though. That was not relaxing. It wasn't very good really, but it got me my Magic the Gathering fix when my friends who played it weren't around. I remember.
The one that I tried from around there, it almost felt like an adventure game, but I don't remember what it was called. I'd have to Google it, but I've played games like that. But if a self-contained Magic the Gathering experience, that sort of that's not Arena. Go onto Steam and pick up one of the Duels of the Planeswalkers games for $10 or so. It's it will definitely be about Magic cards from around that time, for better or for worse. But that's my Magic the Gathering experience most recently. But now this is definitely not a Magic the Gathering podcast, because I'm sure, like, from what little I know about Magic the Gathering players, I'm sure there are a million podcasts about it. So we don't need to dip our toes into that market. But but one game that's an action game, a first person game with a lot of RPG elements that if we argued hard enough, we could probably talk Mike and Salvato into covering this, is BioShock. And Dom, I would love for you to tell us all about BioShock.
Of course. So BioShock 1 came out 2006, I want to say, around that time.
I think it was 07, but around that time, yeah, like early 360 PS3.
Yeah. And it was just mind-blowing, of course, at the time. The whole are we allowed to spoil the game here?
I mean, if we say spoilers, and
don't go into the very end. We can talk about big daddies and little sisters, but please, would you kindly not spoil the end game?
Okay. Well, it has by far probably one of the most, I think, like one of the most incredible twists in the narrative. Not only once, but I think twice, as you play through the game, and Rapture. BioShock was just a step up in terms of world building and environmental storytelling, and just the gameplay system as well. The whole toying around with plasmids. And one thing I also really appreciated, especially after replaying the first ones more recently, after playing BioShock 1 and 2, is how everything in the game ties back to the background, or to the backstory. And there's really no like superfluous element in the story, and everything has a purpose. And I feel like one of the shortcomings of BioShock 1 was I feel it didn't have quite as good of a personal story. It had a very good big overarching plot throughout the story, but I didn't really feel much for the main character or anything like that. And I feel Bioshock 2 is a game that really remedies this in a lot of ways. Bioshock 2 does get a lot of flack, I feel, quite unfairly so, because it is, it's just a retread of Rapture. Oh, it's not really that exciting. But Bioshock 2, you get to play as Big Daddies, as the first Big Daddy, who are in Bioshock 1, there were boss enemies you encountered. And for just as I feel like it was a fresh enough take for a sequel, and Bioshock 2 really improves upon, I feel, the personal story that could be told within Rapture. And personally, I do enjoy Bioshock 2 more than 1, which might be a bit of a hot take, but I feel
so
Bioshock
hot.
2
dropping that. Oof, too hot.
And yeah, I just feel Bioshock 2, when I played it, I just had, I knew about Rapture, I had the backstory, I know what it's about, and Bioshock 2 just added that nice personal edge to the story that I enjoyed a lot more, especially with its very varied endings. I feel it had a better morality system in place than Bioshock 1, which was very, very kind of very in your face and a little bit too on the nose, I would say. And of course we have Infinite, which personally I'm not a big fan of, which also might be a bit of a hot take, but
so hot.
I found Infinite
it.
I found Infinite to be just a bit I mean, of course Infinite was met with huge critical acclaim when it was released in 2013, but I just felt a lot of Infinite didn't feel quite as cohesive as Rapture did. Like the vigors were kind of not really explained properly. They were just kind of there because it's a Bioshock game and you get to do cool fancy abilities like taking control over people's minds and like shooting electricity out of your hands. And they implemented like a weapon system limit. Like you can only carry 2 weapons at a time, but they have a whole bunch of weapons that they kind of want you to experiment with. But I felt like there were a lot of conflicting design decisions in Bioshock, both in terms of gameplay and story, or in Bioshock Infinite in terms of gameplay and story, that I didn't quite vibe with. So it's still a good game. I'd still play it, but it's not my favorite of the series, definitely.
Okay. I have a lot of thoughts here. I'm going to try to I'm going to try to avoid over soliloquizing about this. But BioShock is not my kind of game. I don't play very many first person shooting games at all. But the grand exceptions to those rules are Far Cry 3, which I adore, the Mass Effect series, which I adore, and BioShock 1, which was basically universally acclaimed when it came out. And I played it a year or two later, in let's say 2009 or 2010, because that's I didn't get a PS3 until 2009, and that's definitely where I played it, and I loved it. It is this game that is very, very bleak, but is definitely about giving players a lot of gameplay decision power. Like depending on your combination of plasmids and how much you've explored and what you've done so far in the game, there are a ton of ways to approach any enemy or any boss fight. And because you're in this underwater bunker that was built as an Ayn Rand utopia and then completely failed and fell into disrepair and cannibalism and all kinds of nasty nonsense, it's this really cool, scary setting. But you're right, the player character is a bit detached from Rapture, and the main character of BioShock 1, I would say, is Rapture, the city.
Yeah,
learning about the setting and the politics of the people leading it and why it fell and who you're dealing with. It was maybe the biggest example of those. You can almost make fun of them now, but like games where their narrative was delivered to you by finding tapes or audio diaries. Like that became a really, really weird recurring trope of games in the 2000s, and the South Park RPG even made fun of that a lot in that game. But like your BioShocks and your Dead Spaces and whatnot, they all did that, and BioShock was maybe the biggest culprit. But in that kind of storytelling, they give you a lot of really interesting world building. And I maintain, again, I'm not an expert on first person shooters or first person RPGs, but Fort Frolic, the area where Xander Cohen is sort of the main head honcho,
Yeah.
is one of the best levels of the 2000s. That part around the middle of the game is peak BioShock to me, because even though most of the decision making in BioShock is, do you kill them or do you not kill them? Everything that you see in Fort Frolic is scary and twisted, and Xander Cohen is a completely off the wall character. And both the setting and the quest design is just really good in that level. While a lot of the optional stuff in BioShock is how do you avoid the Big Daddy, or how do you kill the Big Daddy, and do you save the little sister for less rewards, or do you kill the little sister for more rewards? It's a little bit binary, and the decision making isn't that interesting. But the gameplay variety is incredible in BioShock 1. And BioShock 2, mostly reusing the setting, but being more character driven is really interesting. I've also heard the BioShock 2 DLC is great, but I haven't played it, so I don't know that. And BioShock Infinite getting an incredibly positive critical reception at the time, and then a popular reception that started out mostly positive and then got worse and worse over the years because of the problematic parts of its storytelling. And its very, very awkward tie-ins to old BioShock. BioShock Infinite was very celebrated at first, and now people will call it maybe the worst of the trilogy, depending on who you ask. It's really interesting looking at the lifetime of BioShock from 2007 to 2013 and beyond. But I think that, again, the only one, I've only played the first few hours of Infinite, and I have not touched BioShock 2. But BioShock 1 is wonderful, and I think that anyone that can get into this kind of game absolutely should try it.
I think BioShock 1 is foundational to a lot of what in every genre, including RPGs that we play today. Like you said, the audio diary systems, environmental storytelling, like it was unparalleled at the time, and it still shines today. Actually, I think Game Maker's Toolkit, one of his earliest videos was about Fort Frolic, which is an amazing level of a video game. I love BioShock. I think it's a great game. I like BioShock 2. It didn't stick with me as much. I don't know. I found the philosophical questions raised by the antagonist in that game weren't quite as interesting as the ones that were raised in BioShock 1. But it was a very good game, and it played very well. I am one of those people who really actually enjoys BioShock Infinite. I am a sucker for parallel universes, alternate realities. The way that game explores that breaks down. It becomes very meta around the end of it without explaining, without any spoilers. And I really, really enjoyed that. I had a lot of fun with BioShock Infinite. I think the big thing for me is what BioShock Infinite could have been if you watched some of like the E3 trailers and things like that about what was promised and what they were working towards. And eventually they needed to scale back because I guess time limits and restrictions on what video games could do in that period. It feels a bit like a tragedy because like this could have been, it's hard to describe what this game could have been. If you watch the trailers, you'll understand. As it is, it feels a little bit like a shadow of that, but it's still a shadow that I enjoy. And I think that Elizabeth is one of the best supporting characters in a video game ever made. I love her. I think she is extraordinarily well acted. I think her journey, her character journey is touching and heartbreaking and logical. And where she ends up at the very end of that game and at the end of the DLC is another question. It's painful in a lot of ways, and I really like that character. So I think if you're going to be coming at it from a character point of view, I think the strongest character in all of the games is Elizabeth.
So I'm not a horror game type of player. I didn't find the prospect of Alan Wake all that appealing. But for whatever reason, when I was playing BioShock 1, I really enjoyed the atmospheric horror nature of it. It's one of the only horror-esque games that I actually finished and really enjoyed it for that matter. I have not played 2, and I did beat Infinite, but I have not finished the DLC that they did, which takes place before the events of the first game. But I don't know, for some apparent reason, Bioshock 1 just has that very interesting place in my gaming library where it's a horror game that I finished.
I mean, I played a bit of the first Bioshock. For whatever reason, I got part of the way through it and got busy with something else in life or whatever, and I haven't actually finished the first game, but that's definitely a series that I want to try again on sometime.
All right. Well, I think we've each delivered our thoughts on Bioshock. I think that game's excellent, but let's talk about a different excellent first-person game that came out in 2007. Jono, educate us on Portal.
First off, 2007 was a hell of a year.
Yes, it was. You look at that list. It's full of bangers, from your Mario Galaxies to your Portals to what have you. But yeah, let's stick to Portal.
Yeah. So Portal is it's not just an amazing game. I would argue it's one of the most. I would argue it might be one of the funniest games ever made. To this day, it's just pitch black hilarious. It's a brilliant puzzle game, and I mean, there's a reason why. It might be one of the reasons why Steam as a platform even exists now, is because of, the success of Portal and obviously Half-Life. So Portal was originally going to be developed by a bunch of kids just in like school. They developed a game called, I think it was, let me look at it, Narbacular Drop. They created the Portal system, but it was this game looked very medieval and was kind of like it was very grungy and medieval, and looked like it was almost more of
it was almost more of a tech demo or a proof of concept than a full game, but it is the Portal Zero that led to Portal happening.
Yeah, and then they showed it to Valve, and Valve's response was, "Yeah, we'll buy it, and we'll take all of you too." And then they put the entire team to work on creating Portal. And originally, Portal used assets from Half-Life because it was using the same engine. And eventually, it was revealed it takes place in the same world, but it's very standalone. And the first game is, I would argue, one of the best experiences to this day you can have playing a video game. It is a perfect little pearl of a game. It only takes a few hours to play. It's hysterically funny. The character of GLaDOS, who is the antagonist and your companion character who talks to you throughout, is amazing. It ends with probably the biggest and best surprises of any video game I've ever played. The ending of this game is legendary for a reason. And it became, it was very popular. And what was most amazing, it wasn't even a standalone game. It was released as a part of the Orange Box, which was, included Half-Life, and I think Half-Life Episode 1 and Team Fortress 2, or was it just Team Fortress 1?
No, it was Team Fortress 2, Half-Life Episode 1 and 2, and Half-Life 2 and Portal. It was 5 games, a full console release. I think it's the only way to play a Valve game on 360 or PS3. And Valve has been all PC ever since. But I remember that 2007 Orange Box is one of the most special collections of video games ever. But please continue.
Yeah, it's legendary. So anyway, after that success, they were looking at, trying to come out with a Portal 2, and they were working with some different mechanics, one of which is they've never really revealed it, but eventually they realized we're going to stick with Portal, and if we're going to bring back GLaDOS, we need to also bring back Chell, who is the main character. But they introduced a new delightful character named Wheatley, who has gone down in history as, again, one of the funniest characters in gaming. And Portal 2 was a massive expansion of Portal 1, which revisited even some of the earlier areas, but introduced some new concepts, some very, very smart puzzles, and introduced many, many people to the work of J.K. Simmons, who, as many people know, is, J. Jonah Jameson, but is also
Cave Johnson.
I would argue equally iconic Cave Johnson here as
best character in the whole series, Cave Johnson.
When life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade.
Make life take the lemons back.
Make life take the lemons back.
It's
probably one of the best comedic monologues in all of video games.
And come on, but before J. Jonah Jameson, he was on Law and Order in the 90s for like 5 years or something.
Yeah, and he was on Oz as well.
Yeah. Oh God, he was terrifying in Oz.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
He's an astounding actor. I think everyone agrees with that.
Yeah, he won his Oscar for Whiplash many years later, but again, he absolutely slays it as Cave Johnson.
Yeah, it's an amazing
And
performance.
and oh goodness, he was in the Invincible cartoon last year.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, he was. He was Omni-Man. Anyway, so yeah, Portal 2 was amazing, but what was even more amazing is how they expanded it. They came out with the first co-op, with a co-op version of it. They released the Perpetual Testing Initiative, which was people could create their own levels, and they even created a Cave Johnson story to accompany it. And there have been multiple fan-based DLCs that have been released over the years, which, while not quite as good, are very good. Like there's Aperture Tag, which involves it still uses portals, but you don't have a portal gun. You have a gun that paints the walls with various kinds of paint that you use for puzzle solving in this game. Portal Stories, which takes place, it's a prequel to the game. A recent one, which is amazing, is Portal Reloaded, which introduces a third portal, which allows you to travel through time in test chambers, and which creates quite a few head scratchers. But yeah, I think these games are amazing. One of the biggest tragedies for me is when I played it, and for years after, I didn't have any friends who played video games. I was very I went to theater school, and I went to school with people who just didn't like video games for the most part. I have never found anyone that I can play the co-op campaign with Portal 2 in. I played that game to death, and I've never played the co-op campaign. And Amanda is insanely sick when she plays first-person shooters. She can't play them, so I can't play it with Amanda. At some point, I will play it. I will find someone who has never played has never played the co-op campaign and wants to play it. But until then, yeah, this is a brilliant game. I don't think anyone can argue with that. Even if they aren't a fan of puzzle games, there's still so many pieces of this it just makes it one of the best video game experiences you can possibly have, in my mind.
I adore Portal and Portal 2. I played them a little bit late. I had laptops for university in the late 2000s, but I didn't have a PC that could play good video games until late 2011, early 2012, when I built the machine that I am using right now to record this podcast. And I already had a Steam account to play some older things on my laptop. But when I loaded up my Steam account on my new PC for the first time, one of the first things I got was a Portal 1 and 2 collection. I think it was at a summer sale or maybe the holiday sale in 2012. I played them back to back, and they were one of the first games I played on my new PC when I was exploring good PC gaming for the first time in my life. Because until then I was still playing StarCraft 1 in 2010 on an old laptop that was on its last legs. But playing them back to back was so special to me, and I think Portal 2 is one of the great video game sequels. It expands the world and expands the gameplay and adds and it tells a great story without feeling like it loses control of its narrative. And it's fun throughout. It doesn't stay around too long or ever get boring. And then it has all this cool multiplayer stuff that I didn't play the multiplayer with friends on PC, but one of my friends that had Portal 2 on his 360, I played it with him. I don't know. I think sometime after I finished the single player story on my own, and the co-op is as good or better than the gameplay of the main story. Portal 1 and 2 are capital A accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Portal 1 and 2 are amazing. Nothing bad to say about either of them.
Yep.
Early on, when my wife and I were dating, Portal 2 was one of the games we played together. Definitely helps you work on your communication.
If it doesn't bring you together, it'll break you up.
Yeah. And the guy who wrote the theme song for, I believe, the first one, the cake song,
Jonathan Colton, who wrote. Yeah, he also wrote theme songs at the end of Portal 2 and at the end of. I think like it was like Lego Batman or one of the.
No, he wrote a new one for Portal, for the Portal DLC of Lego Dimensions. He wrote a brand new one.
That's what it was. Yeah, I knew it was a Lego game, but yeah, he wrote a third one for the Lego game that mentions Batman in it. But yeah, Jonathan Colton is he's also the co-host of a game show called Ask Me Another. That was the inspiration for the Retro Encounter game shows.
Oh, we got to see Jonathan Colton in concert actually. And
that's awesome.
He did play the Cake song.
Oh,
and it was pretty amazing. Of course, it was acoustic, and it was only him singing, not the.
It was not the studio version, but still, that definitely counts.
Yep.
I really enjoyed Portal 2. I've actually never gone back and played 1.
Do it.
I've only played 2.
You should go back and play Portal 1. It's
like 5 hours. You can beat that thing in an afternoon.
Oh, I'm sure. Portal 2 has just very good puzzles, and it's also paced very well too. It actually has a little bit of a narrative to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it has like 2 or 3 distinct halves or parts. I like the writing a lot. I like J.K. Simmons and the voice actors for GLaDOS and what's the other
Wheatley, voiced by Stephen Merchant.
Yeah, Wheatley. Yep. And just the way that the story goes halfway through is a really cool twist, I thought. I'm not going to say what it is or anything. I really hope that Valve themselves will go back and revisit the franchise like every other franchise that they have yet to revisit.
Yeah, they're making way too much money on Dota 2 to care about almost anything else.
I know, like the only franchise of theirs that they update, not in numbered sequels, but they update Half-Life quite often or relatively often.
Not enough. Like people have been crying about Half-Life 2 Episode 3 for way longer than about a potential Portal 3.
I just feel like Portal it needs more. I want more Portal. I'll go back and play the first one at some point. But
they do reference Portal. I mean, when they first released a lot of their VR tools, some of their first like demos and test things was set in Aperture Laboratories. So, and in Aperture Science. So they are referencing and they are doing things. It seems to me that Portal 3, I don't even have VR, but if they're going to be releasing a Portal 3, it's got to be on VR. That's just an astoundingly
Portal game. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, Half-Life Alyx was one of the better VR experiences that's been made. So Valve is definitely interested in VR. And a Portal game in VR makes sense, but I have no idea what the timeline for that would be.
It sounds like it will make... I think it'll be a game that'll make a lot more people motion sick than other VR games, just because of the concept of the game.
A lot of falling, yeah.
I mean, they could make it work if they tried, and I sure hope they do release another Portal game in one way or another.
I mean, pretty much, Portal 1 was... definitively one of the funniest games to this day that I've ever played.
Oh god, it's
Portal 2 has been one of the definitive co-op experiences back when I still had my PS3 and even now on PC with my friends that I play with sometimes. And it's just fantastic. I feel like the co-op is just it's so well like handcrafted, such perfectly made for co-op. Like when you there's so many puzzles where it's like, wow, this is made perfectly for co-op. Like I can't think of a better word. And yeah, I just love how all the puzzles are there's so much thought put into them, and I can really feel that as I also like work my brain trying to solve them.
Yeah, there's nothing that makes me feel quite like a genius as figuring out a really tough puzzle in Portal. And also, I gotta say, just the last thing I want to say about this game is that we were talking about some of these characters. I would argue that Chell is one of the great silent protagonists. Because there's it's not just she's silent because, they don't want to write dialogue for her. She's being silent because she is way too stubborn and she refuses to talk to GLaDOS. That is, like, canonically, she just refuses to talk. And I think that is a hilarious character choice.
Well, GLaDOS multiple times says that Chell's a little bit chunky, and that's just rude. So Chell will not dignify that with a response. Okay, if we are talking about the appropriateness of discussing the weight of others in the room, I think it's time to move to a different sort of we're not a million miles away from BioShock, a game with zombies and horror elements and a lot of production value and critical acclaim. Abe, tell us about The Last of Us.
It's pretty different from BioShock, really.
Yes, it is. I was looking for any segue I could find.
Yeah, it's a nice try.
The Last of Us? No. Big Daddy and Little Sister. Perfect.
There you go. That's a good segue. Yeah,
The Last of Us is BioShock 2, QED.
Yeah. I think for The Last of Us, you play the first game for the story, and you play the second one for the gameplay. The Last of Us kind of it's weird to say, but it kind of snuck up on me. It's obviously a big AAA game, but the Walking Dead TV show came out in 2010, and after that, there was the big resurgence, and everything was zombies. You even got your Jane Austen novels with zombies. You had Capcom adding a second zombie series, and you even got a Yakuza zombie game.
We don't talk about that.
It kind of snuck up on me, to be honest. I wasn't, when Naughty Dog announced that they're making a zombie game, I was not really looking forward to Uncharted with zombies. But I got, when I bought my PS4, I got a free code for the PS4 version of the game, even though it came out on PS3 originally. And I didn't have any other games to play for the PS4 at the time, so I booted it up, and the first game, it kind of is Uncharted with zombies. That's not wrong to describe it that way. But talking about Big Brother and such. The story with an old gruff guy losing his family, and then teaming up with a younger girl to try to survive the zombie apocalypse. Those stories of the old guy and the young person always get me. So it was okay, and it was kind of Uncharted like. It kind of moved sort of on rails. You're only going forward. When you're talking about zombie games, you do get into stealth gameplay a little bit, and it does in this game too. And I already said that, I enjoy the stealth gameplay. So, but then The Last of Us 2 was an interesting case, because it was, it's not like that like the story is told poorly, but it's a little bit misguided. They bring in this anti-revenge message, and then they give you this great gameplay that makes killing people so much fun. There was unlike the sort of Uncharted style gameplay of the first game, it puts you in these levels that are so much more open. You have so many weapons and munitions and such to dispatch them with. It puts you in these these levels with where you had to fight human enemies and zombies at the same time. One of my favorite things to do was throw a Molotov cocktail at one of the humans and watch the zombies swarm them, and then just clean up after after they're all done fighting each other. The Last of Us 2, I think, has one of the better representations for LGBT people, and especially in AAA games. I don't know if you can name another big game where you play the game as a lesbian. And then, it's one of the few AAA games where there's actually a trans character. So, I know the series has some issues, but I really enjoy Uncharted with zombies, apparently.
I really enjoyed the gameplay of Uncharted, and Last of Us, especially to me, is a bit hit or miss. I enjoyed the gameplay of Last of Us 2 more than 1, just because it was their more recent game. They've got more used to their shooting mechanics in Last of Us. but I enjoyed the story of 1 a lot more than 2. I did not think 2's story was all that good. The characters were good. It's just that the circumstances that they were put in that I didn't really like. You mentioned earlier some of the interactivity within the combat spaces, with throwing a Molotov cocktail at a human and then having all the zombies go over to the human. That's one of the things that I liked a lot about 1 and especially 2, was I felt like I had more options to deal with all the combat spaces, or I could just avoid them entirely in 2's case at points. That's what I think, other than the story of 1, that's what I enjoy most about the Last of Us games, was the approachability to some of the combat spaces in the game, especially 2.
The Last of Us 1 was, I feel, it was one of the last games released on PS3, I think. And unfortunately, I haven't gotten around to playing either of the games, but The Last of Us 1 was definitely probably one of the most enjoyable playthrough watching sessions I've had. Like, it was a 20-hour movie for me, basically, and I enjoyed every minute of it, almost.
I think the second game also has maybe like one of the more positive visions of like post-apocalyptic society. You have a commune of people who generally just kind of get along together, and bigotry is actually seen as something worth kicking someone out of the colony for, sort of.
I haven't played either one of the games. I bought the first one. It's on my PS5 to be played at some point in the future, but I have to admit that the discourse about The Last of Us 2 has actively put me off playing either game in the series. And I'm not talking about whether everyone on here, whether you like it or dislike the story. It's one of those situations where a large portion of the internet got in their corner and the other side was evil and wrong and didn't have any right to their opinion. It's one of those internet conflicts, which I just was kind of like, I don't really want to get involved in this, even with my own opinion in my own head. So I decided just not to play the first game. At some point I probably will, because I own it. And I've heard it's an extremely good game. And then I'll make the choice to play the second. But yeah, I don't know. It's just something about the discourse has left a bad taste in my mouth about the series. And I think that's a real shame.
Yeah, The Last of Us 2 community writ large is extremely toxic, which is unusual because the game had a lot of critical acclaim and a lot of fan acclaim, and you'll see very smart people on the internet speak very highly of it. But if you go onto something like the Last of Us subreddit or a Last of Us large community forum or something, and it will just be disgusting, just the absolute worst. So I don't want to judge it for that. I'm going to judge it because, as we've established before, I don't like stealth games, and I have tried to play. I tried to play The Last of Us multiple times. I have it on PS4, the remastered version, and I tried to play it. Oh boy, I'm going to get years wrong. I think like for a while in 2019, and then for a while in 2021, and both times I just did not like playing it. I don't gravitate to zombie stuff. My list of horror games I love is very short. BioShock is on that list and Last of Us isn't. And I don't really like a lot of stealth gameplay. So I own Last of Us 1, but not 2. And I haven't gotten probably further than hour 3 or 4 because I just wasn't interested. But that is definitely a me problem and not a Last of Us problem.
In regards to Last of Us 2's story and just character choices, it's hearing about it out of context, which is where most of the internet discourse lied. It was much better in context, but for me, I feel like the story of 2 took a few risks, and I don't think any of them particularly paid off all that well. One of these risks was leaked way early, but honestly, I think in the grand scheme of things, certain events kind of got a little bit too much hate thrown at Naughty Dog. And it's kind of unfortunate, honestly. It's a game. It's a piece of art. I don't think you need to thrash people for it, but
Yeah, I agree. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean you're. That's what really drives me crazy. I hate Star Trek Discovery, for example, but whenever I look online about the reasons why people hate Star Trek Discovery, I'm like, oh, I don't agree with any of these reasons. I don't like the current seasons of Doctor Who, and I am a huge Doctor Who fan. But when I look at the reasons why people hate the current seasons of a series of Doctor Who, I'm like, wow, that's really disgusting and horrifying, and I hate the fact that I on the surface share your opinion, but not for the reasons that you're saying. That's just the internet. And sometimes the internet is a horrible, horrible place where I wish that I could hide from it. But it's very difficult when you are, you're trying to follow gaming news and things like that, because it's sort of, our job.
For me, it's like I appreciate Neil and company doing these major things and trying to really shake the story of the established characters and new characters up. I just don't feel like I don't hate the choices. I just don't think these choices were justified. But you see a lot of outspoken hate about them, and I'm like, I don't think it's deserved in that regard, though.
Yeah, from what I've heard, in many places they didn't stick the landing of the choices, and that's fine, but that's not a failure of the choices themselves. In fact, from what I've heard, some of the storytelling decisions were like, wow, that's really smart. That turns everything on its head.
I mean, I can also understand it's not the most appealing thing to play a game about a virus taking over society at this point in human history.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate timing.
So I could understand that. That's my last thought. The last of my thoughts.
All right. Well, that was the last of our thoughts on The Last of Us. This is the easiest transition I ever have to make. Steven, your pick for the round 2 was Uncharted. So let's go on to let's move.
Let's move.
The Last of Us without zombies.
Yeah. You say that, but a couple Uncharted games have Nazi zombies in them. So, Steven, let's talk about. Let's see, what is it? Indiana Drake or Man Raider, as it were.
So let me preface this with, I don't know how you did not come to Abe and I to switch topics.
I didn't. And you didn't pick the same topic, so I decided to let it go.
Well, these are they're both by the same developer, and they, zombies inclusion or not, they share a lot of like gameplay philosophies with each other. Granted, Uncharted's more frantic. It's a lot more frantic than Last of Us usually is. I am a passive fan of the trilogy. I came on board with the Nathan Drake collection on PS4. And Bluepoint did an amazing job with those remasters. In that sense, I don't think the PS3 games aged all that well, but they still have this really cool Indiana Jones-esque movie quality to them. The first 3 games, at least. I'll talk about 4 and Lost Legacy in a second. But I think they also offer a bit of a good challenge. And it's a different kind of challenge than what Last of Us offered, where it's more, it's a lot more chaotic and situational in that way. Uncharted 3 came after Last of Us 1. I don't know. I think the 2 teams were different. But what I'm just trying to say is it's 2 interesting halves. I think I prefer the Uncharted half more on the gameplay side, especially because the accessibility options, especially recently, have been very good for all of their games. And then beyond the original trilogy, I honestly think that 4 and Lost Legacy are leaps and bounds better than the first 3 games. I really enjoyed 4. It was Neil Druckmann's take on these characters. And I think he wrote them better than the trilogy did. I think the trilogy was much more popcorn style, Indiana Jones inspired games. But I think the 4th game took that and added a lot more character depth to it, while also making the games more open than the original trilogy was, because it was just like Last of Us 1. limited by the PlayStation 3. It was more of a corridor type of game series before. And then Lost Legacy is that open area that 4 had, but blown up by 2. That was where most of the game took place.
And Lost Legacy took the best character from Uncharted 2 and the best character from Uncharted 4.
Yeah, Chloe. I love Chloe. Chloe's a great character.
And just had the 2 best female leads in the series just banter for 8 hours, and it was a great decision.
Absolutely. My favorite character, I think, outside of Nathan, Elena, and Sully, is Chloe in the whole series. I think she's a fantastic character, and I'm glad that she got her own time in the spotlight again, because I don't think before Lost Legacy came out we would ever see that character again. So I'm very glad that we did.
Yeah, she's only in Uncharted 3 for like 5 minutes, which is
Was she? I don't even know.
She was in she was at the heist at the beginning, and then that was it. She was in the
So
she was in maybe 2 missions early on in Uncharted 3, and then that was it. But she's a dominating force in Uncharted 2, and it was awesome seeing her again in Lost Legacy.
Yeah, one of the two last things. One of the reasons why I like 4 and Lost Legacy more is because I like that for these 2 games they removed or largely abandoned, except for the multiplayer, the supernatural elements. It was more grounded in that sense, which I appreciated more. And I can't wait to play the collection that at time of recording is going to come out in 2 weeks.
So I have a lot of Uncharted thoughts. I got a PS3 in 2009, and Uncharted Drake's Fortune came with it. So it was literally the first PS3 game I played, although I played it a couple when it was, I think Uncharted 2 was already out when I played Uncharted 1. And a small correction, Stephen, Uncharted 3 did come out before Last of Us. They were Uncharted 3 was 2011 and Last of Us was 2013.
Oh, okay.
All right. But but I do agree with several of your points. Uncharted 1 through 3 were basically sort of corridor shooting set piece, puzzle set piece corridor, with maybe some of those three categories shuffling around a little bit until the end of the game. And they do sort of like start out as a genuinely interesting cinematic treasure hunting story that eventually devolves into supernatural nonsense. Like without spoiling it too much, it's like, oh, it turns out that the legend of El Dorado was really zombies, like and twists not that dissimilar to that one in all 3 of those games. And they're exciting and fun to play through once, but it's really a bit of a roller coaster ride. It's sort of in and out, unless you really want to collect like Magic Eye Find the Relic, then I don't think there's a ton of value revisiting them, or it's not that interesting re-experiencing those gameplay bits, although some of them are really good. Like I love the temples and puzzle stuff in Uncharted 2. But Uncharted 4, I think, is the best one. Uncharted 4 makes it gives you bigger areas to explore. The climbing and the shooting is as good as it's ever been. And things like the pirate treasure puzzles go really, and the racing segments are fun and go really interesting places. And it almost feels like they're telling a joke, because they have the 2 most prolific male voice actors of their generation voicing brothers. It's Nolan North and Troy Baker voicing brothers together. And again, like, Sam is a great addition to the cast. It's a great Sully game, although I think Uncharted 3 is maybe Sully's finest hour, but it's in terms of performances and gameplay changes and how beautiful the game is, Uncharted 4 I think is the pinnacle of the series, and Lost Legacy was sort of made in the mold of Uncharted 4, but starring 2 of the best NPCs from older Uncharted games. We mentioned Chloe from Uncharted 2 as one of them, and which makes I don't know if Lost Legacy is as good as the heights of Uncharted 2, but the later Uncharted games are sort of best in class for that series, and maybe it's because it was the first PS3 game I played, and I genuinely enjoy a somewhat uncomplicated third person action game once in a while, but I've played all 5 of those. I never played the Vita game, and enjoyed all of them. I think I don't know if all of them are worth a full 70 bones on PS5 or whatever, but they are worth playing if you go in with the right expectations, and just like, this is a popcorn ass 8-hour video game times 5.
Mm-hmm. Agreed on that. Also, I don't really have much to add here, but I have to say Uncharted 4 has possibly one of the best 30-second trailers ever made. It's called A Man Behind the Treasure, and it is like, I currently don't have a PS4, but I really like, just watching this trailer just makes me want to go out and get one right now. So yeah.
And as a one aside, I don't remember every detail about Lost Legacy, but the first 4 Uncharted games highlight 3 of the best lost treasure real life stories. Because the first one is El Dorado, the second one's Shambhala, the third one is Irem of the Pillars, and the fourth one is Libertalia, the pirate utopia. And those are 4 real legendary places that could inspire an Indiana Jones or Tomb Raider like adventure. And I thought that was cool, like bringing a little bit of nonfiction into this very fictional but overall pretty fun series.
So the treasure of Lost Legacy is the Tusk of Ganesh. I don't know a whole lot about the.
I knew it was Indian and tying into the heritage of both protagonists, but I forget the name of it. I'm sorry.
I don't know a whole lot about the history and background of the real world past or like mythos in India, but I think that it wasn't a very good MacGuffin, but it made for a very good setting to have it be from, because I really enjoyed the explorable area in Lost Legacy.
I like any conversation where someone gets to say MacGuffin.
I mean, really, that's kind of what this series is. It's a series of trying to track down MacGuffins.
I mean, look, we all play video games. We have tracked down many a MacGuffin over the years.
Oh yes.
I had to find the 5 Master Core MacGuffins in Tales of Arise, not 21 days ago. Yeah. I don't want to make this sound like a negative, but I think the Uncharted games are sort of empty calories action games. But a lot of the time, but I also feel the same way about like a lot of action movies that I love and revere even. And these are just really beautiful, fun versions of those. But but none of them are going to show up on my top 10 favorite games list that I can concoct. Like, if you can get these at a reasonable price and know what you're getting into, they're awesome. But if you're expecting like a meaty RPG, or an action game with a lot of customization and precision, that's not these. If you want something that's beautiful and fun and has snappy dialogue, and you can be in and out in like 3 evenings of playtime, then that's exactly what these are. And I think Uncharted 4 is the best one, but they're all worth playing.
Yeah, and Uncharted 4 is the longest as well. I think that one averages around 12 to 16.
Probably. I'd have to check how long to beat, but they feel like short-ish experiences.
Yeah, the first 3 are definitely you can beat in a couple afternoons.
But as RPG players, all 5 of us are used to some long ass games, and yeah, exactly. And Final Fantasy 14, this ain't.
But yeah, if you treat them as kind of what they are, being like fast-paced popcorn action flick games, I think you'll have a good time.
All right, well, that is discussion of 10 games or kinds of games or series that are definitely not RPGs. So listeners, I hope you found this entertaining or illuminating or however you felt it. Thank you for joining us for this over 2-hour epic discussion of 10 things that aren't RPGs. And those things were Capcom fighting games, Hollow Knight, Remedy Studio games, Metal Gear Solid games, Tetris Effect, customizable and deck building card games, BioShock series, the Portal series, the Last of Us series, and the Uncharted series. All of those are worth playing or worth checking out. If you were unfamiliar with any of the ones we discussed, but they sound interesting, then you are a few Google searches away from trying them for yourselves. But before we move on to housekeeping, I have one final thing I want to spring on you guys, and I'm going to keep this short to 30 seconds each or so. If you could recommend one game from the games you discussed in your segments tonight, what for an audience that plays video games but hasn't played any of these, what would it be? I will go first. I think that listeners should go, if they are interested in that discussion on deck building games that we had a little while ago, I would recommend trying out Monster Train. Monster Train is a deck building card game where you are a group of demons trying to get the last flame of hell to the middle of hell because you've lost a war to the angels and hell has frozen over. It's really fun and colorful, and once you grasp the rules, it is just really fun to do a 30-minute run of it. And I've unlocked a lot of stuff in it, but I have not gotten anywhere near the end of the depth that that game can confer. So if you're interested in a cartoony heaven versus hell card game, Monster Train comes highly recommended. Dom, what's the one game you would recommend from the set you talked about tonight?
Yeah, if you're vaguely interested in or have Souls likes, then Hollow Knight is 100% a game you should try out. It perfectly encapsulates that vibe, and it has its own twists to it, and it is a fantastic game to play as well, and it is amazing value on Steam. What's there not to like?
Perfect. And Jono?
Portal. It's one of the greatest video games ever made. It's incredibly clever. It's pitch perfect funny. And you can get it insanely cheap on any Steam sale. It's well worth it at full price, but if you get it on Steam sale, you can get it really, really cheap. Just buy it. Just buy it offhand. Play it when you feel like it. You're in for a treat.
Yeah, log in, add it to your wish list, and then buy it when it's $3 or less, because it's probably just a matter of weeks. Now, Abe, same question.
Because of availability, I would say Metal Gear Solid 5. If you can track down the first one, if it ever becomes available anytime soon, I would recommend going with that. But 5 is available, and it's a great game, and it's a fun sandbox to play with, and it still incorporates all the quirky Hideo Kojima-ness of the series.
And that'll just make you one more player that has to demilitarize all of your nukes before the world can see the true ending.
That's right.
That's never going to happen. Listeners, if you don't know what that means, look it up, because I'm not going to explain it here. But Steven, what's your pick for one game among the set you talked about today?
So if you're in the mood for a visual treat of a classic puzzle game, I would recommend Tetris Effect, especially if you have an Oculus Quest 2 or a PSVR or a other PC headset. This is a fantastic get. It's probably one of my favorite VR games that I have played so far. And it's got modern Tetris flair with some really cool visual stylings.
All right, so there's our discussion followed by our recommendations, and now it's time to end the episode. Listeners, thank you so much again for joining us for this journey, but I forgot to thank my panelists. Thank you, Dom, Jono, Abe, and Steven for talking about things that aren't RPGs for once on a podcast, and a double thank you to Abe and Steven for making your Retro Encounter debuts today.
Woohoo.
Thanks for having me.
But let's now that we've had some newcomers on the show, let's go back to the retro regulars. Next week we are doing, and the week after, we are doing episodes on Skies of Arcadia, the Dreamcast classic, later ported to GameCube, and either of those is one of the best RPGs of the late 90s, early 2000s. I love Skies of Arcadia. I'm not going to be on those episodes because I loaned my copy of Skies of Arcadia to one of the panelists. But that game is excellent, and I cannot wait to hear the discussion starting next week. But later on in 2022, in February, we are doing 2 episodes on Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, the 2003 Xbox and PC game made by BioWare when they were near or at the peak of their powers. It's not an old Infinity Engine game, but it's sort of when they were moving on from Infinity Engine game to whatever Mass Effect and Dragon Age would end up being. but it's a very celebrated Western RPG and Star Wars game, and I'm really excited to play it for the first time for the podcast. And because we're only a few weeks away from those episodes, I probably should start the damn thing. But before I start the damn thing, I'm going to finish the playthrough of the Dark Pictures Little Hope that Peter Triesenberg and I have been doing off and on for the past couple of weeks. I don't play a lot of horror games, so Peter may make fun of me for being a giant baby on that podcast when we record it, but we are playing the Dark Pictures Little Hope, and this is a semi-sequel to the Until Dawn episode that Peter and I recorded a couple of years ago. So for a horror diversion for Retro Encounter, please listen for the Little Hope episode coming in February. But that's enough for the future of Retro Encounter. If you want to message us about the present or future of Retro Encounter, you can email retro@rpgfan.com. Also visit rpgfan.com's message boards, our Facebook page, our Discord server, our Twitch channel, our Twitter account. All of those are called RPGFan or RPGFancom. Something streaming every day on Twitch. Usually it's Scott, but sometimes Steph or Max makes a cameo appearance. We also have 3 other fine podcasts on RPGFan. There's Random Encounter, hosted every 2 weeks, mostly about randomness, mostly starring John O. Logan.
Hello.
And also Rhythm Encounter every other 2 weeks, mostly hosted by Mike Salvato and always about RPG music. There's also Phoenix Edge, our partner podcast, hosted by Hat and Eric. They're on hiatus right now, but they will be coming back in 2022, and their topics of discussion are usually RPGs and RPG current events. You can review Retro Encounter or those 3 other fine podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, whatever you choose. Give us feedback. We love feedback. 5 stars preferred. And if you want to give us 5-star feedback as individuals, let's share our social media with the listeners, starting with you, Jono.
Okay, you can find me at Jono_Logan on Twitter. You can also send me an email at jlogan@rpgfan.com, or if you want to send something about Random Encounter, you can send it to podcast@rpgfan.com.
Now, Abe.
Best way to find me is on Twitter. It's at BabeMoby, BABEMOBY.
Now, Dom.
You can find me hanging out in the Discord most of the time under the handle of DH Canny.
Now, Steven.
You can find me on Twitter at StevenMattern0, no spaces, no underscores. And you can find my music reviews and news coverage on rpgfan.com.
And for me, listeners, you've heard me say this possibly over 200 times. I'm Mike Sollosi. I'm easiest to find on Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times, and on the RPG Fan Discord, I am Monsoon Mike. But, alright, this did give me some more games to play. I'm wondering if I should give Bioshock Infinite another chance, or see if my PS5 can run Control okay. I have a lot of questions, but none of them are about RPGs. Thank you, good night, and good luck.